Berlin, 25 years ago. Imagine if you want to leave your country, but the authorities won't allow you to do so. Imagine your country was closed off by a deadly wall from the rest of the world. That's how it was, not only in the former East Germany, but in many parts of Central and Eastern Europe. Caught on the run, thousands were sentenced to heavy prison sentences. We spoke with one of them. This is Berlin-Hohenschonhausen, a notorious jail where the Stasi, East Germany's intelligence service, interrogated and detained prisoners. Many of them were tortured. At some point it became clear to me I wanted to get away from this country. I was young, I wanted to study, I wanted to see the world. I always had a big dream to go to New York. That's where the desire to leave the country came from. This is one of the cells. The worst memories are really those of uncertainty, especially the boredom, this non-living, this demoralization. It happened automatically. You started to think things over. You weren't allowed to listen to the radio or watch TV. Once a week you could get a book through this flap here. But even that was very depressing because it was bad Soviet war literature. This is one of the cells where prisoners were interrogated. It was meant to break them psychologically. Thomas Lukow describes how it worked. I believe that this was a gradual psychological process. It was subconsciously that it was much worse. You ask yourself, what do they really want? Where does this go? How many years will you get if you're sentenced? Will the West pay to get you free? All this uncertainty was really bad. I was 21, turning 22 in that October. I knew a lot of people. And then from one day to the other, I was completely cut off from society, and I think that was their goal. East Germany never officially recognized that it was keeping political prisoners. Opponents were sentenced for plotting against the state or trying to flee to the West. From 1949 to 1989, there were roughly 230,000 political prisoners. In the post-war period, there were many more, mainly through the Soviet military administration. People who were either Nazis or people who had risen up against the Soviets. In the 1980s, the economic situation in communist countries worsened, and the regimes became more fragile. But nobody could imagine that one day millions of people would ask for change. I'd thought after being detained by the Stasi that this system would exist in perfection for another 1,000 years. But I didn't know what was happening in the background, and so I was sure nothing's going to change. And I knew there were people who were supporting, who were carrying the system. Looking back now, Thomas Lukow says communism was a disaster, and that not even the idea could be considered as being a good one. It was a system that enforced its ideas in an immoral way. It used violence, terror and violence. So you have to ask, what can be good about this if you let a whole continent, Eastern Europe, degenerate economically, ecologically and morally? Then even the idea is no longer suitable. After the fall of the wall, Thomas Lukow built another life for himself and his family. He now tours schools, explaining to the next generation what really happened in a country called the German Democratic Republic.